All right, in my seemingly never-ending quest to get through the month of October, because we're now on November 8th, um, I've been battling through sickness for a few days, so we got even more behind than we already were, but I'm just going to try to push through it, even though my throat feels like it's made of leather, because I'm going to try to shoot a whole bunch of stuff after this as well. But yes, this is going to be our last King novella video. It is the second story in Four Past Midnight after the Langoliers. So yeah, we're just gonna go into this like any other thing. Do you have anything to kind of just in general feelings about Secret Window? Because you saw it
No,
before I.
yeah, it's not a supernatural story,
Yeah,
which which is funny because like when you look at the trailers and stuff, it doesn't really build it up to be that way either. So it's one of those King stories that nothing supernatural takes place. But
yeah.
I think it's one of the only ones where, and I could be wrong, you're the one that knows all the Stephen King stuff. Is this one of the only stories he did where somebody like made up an identity in their mind?
I feel like it's God, he's done so many things, and I've talked about so many of them this year. I feel like there's gotta be another one, but if there is, it'll come to me, I'm sure.
I think the
But
closest would be, I feel like the closest to this would be 1408 when we're not really sure if John Cusack's imagining everything or not.
yeah,
I need to rewatch 1408.
yeah, I talked about it, or I talked about it earlier this year, and I did an old video of it and The Shining together that I think I had Owen get rid of because it was so unsatisfactory. Um, yeah, usually we talk about the differences between the book and the movie in regards to how this series has gone, and there's not a lot. It's actually pretty close. There's a couple of like drastic ones, but other than that, there's not like the whole middle portion isn't really changed much at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like the how the movie starts with him being at the motel and catching his wife with Ted. The story actually starts just right at Shooter saying, "You stole my story."
Man, he would have really been mad if he would have caught his wife with Viggo Mortensen on the steps.
Oh God. It's like for a second I was taking that in the direction of A Perfect Murder, but then it's like, oh, you're talking about a history of violence. That's
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which one is better or worse for Maureen. But I always love that kind of that idea. Like, I mean, I love the idea of the way the movie sets it up because I feel like with the direction the movie goes, it makes sense to start there.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of shows like where his tipping point was. But at the same time, I love the idea of being thrust into it that quickly. You stole my story being the first words of the story, if I remember correctly.
I think it works in both ways. I think for a book, it works a little better to just thrust in like that. But for a movie, I think if you talked about the why he had his tipping point later in the movie, I feel like that would almost kind of feel like tacked on,
Yeah.
where like it would almost come across as expositional
Yeah.
because the movie would have to stop and talk about it, and it would just take you out of the movie for a little bit. I can't think of anywhere later in the movie that you could put it where it didn't feel that way.
Yeah, because a lot of it, because the exposition is kind of where the story gets a little, I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but it's not as enticing as
Mm-hmm.
we're getting the exposition, because it's like, because a lot of it comes in after the fact, whereas we know the ending of the movie and the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
The ending of the story is entirely different because when she goes to the house, there's like kind of a confrontation, and Moore ends up getting shot and killed, and he's the only death for the climax. And then the entire last 10 pages is her like piecing together what all happened and how, and
See,
like where the hat came from and all that stuff.
I feel like the movie has more of a King-like ending where it's bleak.
Yeah. Or cases where it's an ending King wished he'd gone with, like what the Mist did.
Mm-hmm. The
And
mist,
that's the thing
the
also.
ending for the ending for the Mist is such a gut punch.
Yeah. And the thing about Secret Windows ending also is with all the talk about the content of the story, it feels like the ending of the movie is where we were destined to be. Like reading the story is weird because it almost makes the story feel like it doesn't have much of an ending.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the movie just makes it come full circle in like this really, really twisted way, but in an amazing way also in how twisted it is. What do you think about? Because I think one of the main reasons this movie works as well as it does
Mm-hmm.
is obviously depth, but I want to go into depth in a second. The first thing I want to mention is when you talk about how immediately gripping "You Stole My Story" being the first word of the story are when you read it.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, it's like instantly the movie is instantly gripping the first time we see Turturro, and from then
Mm-hmm.
on,
Yeah.
because his performance is so it's so it's so creepy in a way that you would think is kind of over the top, but also kind of not, because you can definitely you can because you it comes off a little over the top until you realize how over the top he could have gone, and then you almost want to appreciate how subdued he is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the way he's able to deliver like these long lines of dialogue, like the "I'll burn your life and every person in it like a cane field in a high wind,"
Mm-hmm.
or the foreshadowing of "You strike me as the kind of guy who's on the lookout for a head he can knock off with a shovel."
Mm-hmm.
Like these lines seem like they would be kind of a mouthful and almost kind of stumble out of an actor's mouth, but he just does it so smoothly where you're not even sure when his sentences are going to end.
Mm-hmm.
But you're almost just like locked into his eyes as he's saying.
Which makes sense now when you look at it because Mort Rainey's a writer. He would imagine stuff being said like that,
Yeah.
which actually just dawned on me.
Yeah, like Shooter speaks like a fictional character.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about that either. Yeah, because Rainey, being the writer, speaks relatively normal. He's got his little Johnny Depp quirks, but he doesn't necessarily. The way his quirks are almost make him feel natural.
See, I feel like Depp in this you could look a lot like Nicholson in The Shining. Like Jack being Jack is what makes Jack Torrance work. Depp being Depp sometimes could be a detriment to a movie, but for this one I think it enhances it.
Yeah, because a lot of it feels like it's one of those performances where you can't tell what's scripted and what isn't,
Mm-hmm.
because everything he like kind of says, even those little moments, just feel so like natural and almost like improvised.
Yeah.
Especially the way he like interacts with his dog.
Yeah.
It's like I'm assuming it's also intended to be foreshadowing how much he like has an how do you call it, an inner dialogue but out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's constantly talking to himself, but at the same time, if you were by yourself, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and you were trying to find like creative ideas, it feels pretty natural that you would just talk to yourself that much.
I also, somewhere inside me, I want Depp to come up with the way that he reacts to his maid.
Yeah. In which way specifically?
When he's angry at her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing too. Now that you mentioned the maid is the whole thing. It's interesting how much foreshadowing is all over this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's like when he throws out Shooter's manuscript and he says like, when she says, "I thought you just threw it away," and he says, "Well, that's not my name. That's somebody else's name." And she says, "Well, I thought it would have been a pseudonym or something."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there's another movie with Timothy Hutton, no less, that I talked about a few years ago that comes from King, The Dark Half, which
Mm-hmm.
I believe is from one of the books that he wrote under Richard Bachman, if I'm not mistaken. And this story was kind of his way of like killing Richard Bachman off,
Mm.
as in somebody with two different sort of personalities, like we're looking at here. So, like I said, it's like you can find the foreshadowing everywhere. Do you remember your initial reaction to the twist?
I remember, like, I didn't really see it coming,
Yeah, because it was. I
which
remember
is
that.
weird because Fight Club had only come out 7 years before, and that was a popular twist to go with for a while. But the way this movie did it, it wasn't that obvious.
Yeah, I think Fight Club was only 5 years, wasn't it? In this 2004.
Oh, I was thinking Fight Club was 97. It's 99, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, even then, that's even more so a surprise that it wasn't seen coming.
Yeah, because it was almost kind of in Fight Club's shadow because when the twist happened, I remember a lot of people saying, "Dude, it's the Fight Club ending."
Yeah, that's now been called the Fight Club twist.
Yeah, and we've seen it a lot more often since then as well.
Hmm. And
But
it's funny.
nowadays it's a lot easier.
It's funny how it's gone from in Fight Club, where it's like an interesting twist, to now it's considered a cliche.
Yeah, like it's a lot of fan theories too.
Hmm.
Like that Ferris Bueller fan theory for one example.
All that Ferris is a figment of Cameron's imagination.
Yeah, which makes no sense, but but yeah, but it's also one of those cases though where it's like it's really great because sometimes when a movie has a twist like that, you can find a lot of holes in it, and it's usually revealing to the idea of they just wanted a big twist, but they didn't think it through enough and go through enough of like planning out for it to really be warranted.
Hmm.
But there's so much here that makes it so obvious when you go back.
Hmm. This is definitely one of those movies that once you learn the twist, you go back and like you said, it's obvious now.
Yeah, because some of the things that some of the things I wonder exactly when it's a clue and when it's not. The moment when he offers him the cigarette,
Hmm.
and it's like we see a similar pack later with Rainey that can give us that vibe, but it's always kind of struck me that scene when it's like who like casually offers somebody the last cigarette like that.
Hmm.
Where it's like it's just like this old ratty pack with just one in it. It just seems
Hmm.
like this blatant clue when you know. Or there's stuff that's really interesting, like stuff that can have you questioning what exactly it is Rainey's doing. Like the moment when he goes to the police about it and he's explaining the car. You know, it's like because I do love that little twist on don't go to the cops.
Hmm.
It's like when somebody tells you to not go to the cops, the first thing you have to do is go to the cops.
Hmm.
But it's like when he goes there and he explains the car and then he says, I didn't get the license plate, which in any other case would be believable, except for the fact that we saw from his point of view pretty much that he did see the license plate.
Hmm. It's not only that, but the fact that, you know, at one point Shooter leaves his hat behind and then he tells Rainey, I want my hat back. You gave it to him.
Yeah. What do you is there anything else like that we're not thinking of? Because I feel like there's even like probably little hidden things we're not even thinking of also.
Not that I could think of.
Yeah, because it's well, there's also the scene when he goes into the bathroom and he thinks that he sees Shooter in there and he attacks and it's just a mirror.
Hmm.
It's like I think there's even like a comedic beat where he says like I killed a mirror, and it's
Hmm.
like yeah, that's exactly what you were trying to do. And I feel like it's everywhere, and you could like analyze it in different ways. But what do you think of it in regards to like a would you? I mean, obviously there's a really thin line between horror and thriller.
Hmm.
Do you think this is? I mean, it's obviously thriller, but do you ever get horror vibes from it?
Not really, no.
Yeah, because we do get a few jump scenes, but even those you can still associate with thriller.
Hmm.
But like the idea of like the dog dying first almost feels a bit slasher movie like.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Charles S. Dutton and the other guy getting killed. And like anybody that gets too close to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and every now and then we get those dream sequences. Like you were talking about how like the way the advertising made it not feel that supernatural. Yet there's that I do remember there was a shot in the trailer that comes from that one dream sequence where he sees like a light behind the front door. It looks like it's getting ready to cave in. But it ends up just being this really brief dream sequence. Where it's like every now and then you can see the like horror imagery in there. Like I've noticed that with a lot of the King adaptations, where it's like if it's not much of a horror story, like whoever the filmmaker is will throw in like a scene or two that kind of gives it almost a horror-y vibe.
And it does seem like they usually go for the dream sequence avenue.
Yeah, like a couple of the examples I'm thinking of, like one was a Tales from the Dark Side episode for Word Processor with the Gods. That ended up being a dream sequence as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's the easiest way to do it. But another thing that comes to mind also as far as it feeling horror-like is this idea that horror movies like to do that is a pretty effective method, which is taking a location that doesn't feel threatening at all, and then you just change it a little bit. Like the fact that he's isolated out in the middle of nowhere. And it's like in the daytime, it's like, oh, he's a writer. This must be paradise. This must be perfect for what he wants to do.
It's the cabin from the Grape Nuts commercial during the day. And at night, it's the cabin from Evil Dead.
Yeah, you froze there a little bit. But yeah, it's the case where like whenever the sun goes down, suddenly it's a horror movie setting.
Mm-hmm.
There's the moment when he like takes the light bulbs outside,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like that isolation is suddenly like the scariest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Which is funny though, because we only see Shooter during the day.
yeah, I think the only exception is that doesn't he attack him like right after he finds the dog or somewhere around there when he has him up against the wall?
I think.
And even then it's pretty brief, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that might be it. I think the rest of his scenes are during the day.
Mm-hmm. And especially that one, the cigarette scene that you were talking about. And Shooter just walks off. Like he doesn't even have his car.
Yeah. That's another thing that kind of feels like foreshadowing also, where it's like he's just literally coming out of the abyss.
Mm-hmm. But you don't think anything of it because that happens a lot in thrillers and horror movies where the antagonist just comes out of nowhere.
You know, I think that's another thing also where it's like when you look at the I mean, I'm going to assume this was, I can't remember the publishing dates off the top of my head the way I can movie dates, but I'm going to assume this was published long before Fight Club,
Mm-hmm.
if I had to guess. And the thing is like when you're doing that, and you're thinking about, you know, where is a movie going to go? Like how is this going to end? But the thing is one of the things that makes you not see that coming, it's a couple of things. Number one is a movie like Fight Club is so bizarre anyway. It almost feels like at home in that story, that's where the story went. But another way is that the surface of this story feels so conventional that you can imagine what the ending, like you pretty much go into this movie, if you go in more or less blind or with just a plot outline, you're just going to imagine the climax being him and like it becoming the end of a horror movie where he and Shooter have a physical confrontation. Shooter might pretend to be dead a couple of times, and then we'll finally kill him, and maybe we'll end up with a cliffhanger or something. That's pretty much the ending you expect going into a story like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only after the fact that you realize how psychological everything is about it.
I also love, this is also something that just popped in my head. It's funny to me that in Rainey's mind, his antagonist shows up out of nowhere, out of the abyss like that. But his antagonist in real life, he runs into him fucking getting gas. Like the most mundane thing.
And that's the thing too, is Ted comes off like this douchebag. And we get that vibe very early in the motel scene. That's how we start the movie.
Rubbernecker.
Yeah. It's like that's the extent of his douchebaggery. And it's the whole thing of like when like Ted's like screaming in his face when he breaks in on them at the motel. It's like, who the fuck are you screaming at, Ted? Like, where's your place in this, asshole?
And he does that throughout the whole movie. Like when they do the insurance claim for the house, and Ted keeps like peeking over, and Mort says what everybody's thinking. I'm sorry, what business is this of yours?
And I love how much it really goes in on it seeming like Shooter is Ted's creation.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, now that we know everything, look at it through Ted and his wife's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And realize that Mort is the scary thing in this whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, oh, now that's definitely terrifying. So that's that almost feels like, that gives me the chills in a way a horror movie probably will.
Mm-hmm. You were also talking about, this is going back a little bit, but you were talking about, you wondered what Depp had ad-libbed versus what was written. I think one of those I've also wondered about too is whenever Mort does the jaw thing right before he does something as Shooter.
Yeah.
Kind of like how Heath Ledger created the little tongue flip for the Joker.
I think it was you that had to point it out to me, that that's the connotation of him doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it's when Shooter's around, or Shooter's going to be around.
Mm-hmm. He's gonna, as Evan from Superbad would put it, he's gonna make an appearance over there.
Yeah, hopefully this is all coming through. I keep getting the connection notification, so hopefully we don't look too bad. But
no, there's only been one instance really where you froze for a minute, but it's funny because you freeze on the Joker playing card face from our camping trip. It froze on that for a minute.
Well, with that said, is there anything else that you have?
Not that I can think of.
Because I think that's pretty much everything I was going to address.
I love how at the end of the movie I love how obvious it is that he's guilty of something, but they can't pin it on him.
Yeah, what exactly is that personality? Like, what?
I just love that the last shot of the movie is just him biting into corn.
Yeah, that is like, so he's so eerie when he's his dorky persona.
Even the chick at the post office is turned off by it.
Yeah.
And I love how essentially the sheriff tells him at the end, you have to shop somewhere else because you're creeping everybody out.
I do love that little thing that they did. Met the girl at the post office when he's leaving, and he hears her say, "I know what you did," when she's actually saying like, they'd shoot me if I did that or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the fact that the way they shot it was her actually saying what he thought he heard, and then she says what she actually said.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really nice technique. So, David Koch, the writer and director, is a really talented dude. He wrote he definitely did the first one. I can't remember if he wrote on all of Raimi's Spider-Man movies or not.
Mm-hmm.
But he did like Stir of Echoes, and he did one of my favorite action movies from the 2010s, Premium Rush, is his, which is a movie I cannot recommend enough.
Michael Shannon's gold mine in it.
Yeah, which is a movie I haven't talked about on this channel yet, and I've been dying to, but I haven't found an excuse yet. So, so is there anything about Secret Window?
Michael Shannon's reaction in that movie to getting shot.
Yeah.
I believe he just says, "What?"
I love how there's going to be somebody that just comes in here and they're like, Man, I wanted to listen to people talk about Secret Window, and I went and got Premium Rush spoiled for me. What's that about?
Well, if they haven't come to expect that from our videos yet, then I don't think there's hope. This is whenever you and I do a video together, it's Tangent City.
Yeah. I try to keep you under control, but sometimes you hypnotize me and we end up in a different place.
Especially when I start connecting movies that aren't connected.
God, imagine if you were doing the Saw video with me I'm about to do.
Hmm.
All 8
I'm
movies.
gonna do it again. The reason Maria Bello is so mad at Vigo in A History of Violence is because she just got out of a relationship with somebody that wasn't who they said they were in her
Ah,
second life.
and that was only the next year after this.
Hmm.
Hit them back to back.
Yeah. I forgot for a second that she was dead when I formed that theory, so it doesn't really work.
All right, so does that pretty much wrap up Secret Window?
I think so.
All right, then we don't know what the next thing we're going to do. There's one or two we tossed around, but I'm assuming we'll get that figured out. Is that pretty much it?
I think so.
All right.